So this lesson is a combination of what we did in last unit with fractions and in this unit using negatives and positives. And so we're going to start things very similar as we would have done when we were just adding fractions, and that is that we need to find the common denominator. And in this case, you can see that the common denominator of 5 and 4 is going to be 20. So to get 5 to 20, I would have to multiply by 4, and whatever I do to the bottom, I also must do to the top. And therefore, 4 times 5 is 20, and 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Now for the second fraction, again, we want to get our denominator to be 20, and therefore I'm going to multiply the bottom by 5. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must also do to the top, and therefore I get 5 over 20. Now my second step is to actually just add and subtract the numerator now. So I'm going to rewrite this, and what I have on top is negative 12 plus 5, and they're over 20. Now notice that the 12 is the bigger negative, and we're adding to the 12 a positive 5, and therefore we know our answer is going to be negative because we have a bigger negative plus a smaller positive, and therefore that's going to be negative. And so I can actually just do 12 minus 5, which is 7, and then in fact all I have to do is I know that the number is going to be negative, so my answer will be negative 7 over 20. Now if you weren't that comfortable with this, you could create a number line and go back 12 and then go forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from 12, and you'll get to negative 7. Either way you think about it, you're going to get to negative 7 over 12. Of course, if I could simplify when I got here, my final step would be to simplify, but 7 is prime and 20 is not divisible by 7, and therefore we're done. Alright, let's do the next one. So B. So I have a half minus negative 2/3. And again, my first step is going to be to find my common denominator. I'm just going to call that CD. They're both prime, therefore there's no point in doing my factor tree. I can say that the common denominator in this case is going to be 6. So I'm going to try and get both of them to 6. The first one, I will have to multiply the top and the bottom by 3, and I get 3 over 6. And now I'm just writing everything else back down exactly as I see it. I'm going to change this piece. I have to multiply the top and the bottom by 2, and I get 4 over 6. My second step, same as last time, I'm going to either add or subtract the numerator. So right now I have, what's going on top? I have 3 minus negative 4 over 6. Now remember, as we talked about in class and before, the negatives are just talking about direction. So whenever I get on my number line, I start out facing the positive direction. But then this negative tells us to turn around and go backwards. But then I have another negative over here, and this negative is telling us to turn around one more time. So notice that I'm back into the positive direction. We saw this before, so this is review. So a negative and a negative becomes positive, so I can rewrite this as 3 plus 4 over 6. And now again, I'm just going to simplify, and I get 7 over 6. Notice that 7 over 6 are also not simplifiable, so this is my answer. Alright, now we have some multiplication. So we were doing addition and subtraction before. Now we're going to do some multiplication. So just like before, when we just had positive numbers, let's simplify through division. So cross division and up and down division. So cross and up and down. Alright. In this one I'm actually going to change the number. I forgot to do this before we started. I want to make this 12. I did that on your sheet, but I forgot to do it here. Now, and this is why I did this, because I want you to see that, okay, well I can do the cross simplification. 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 12 4 times. Now all I have to do is simplify just like before. So I multiply my top and I multiply my bottom. So I get here 1 over 4 times 4 is 16. And I have to take into consideration what the sign is going to be for them. Notice that here I've got an invisible plus sign. Okay, we don't write it, it's just assumed that that one is positive. And we're multiplying by a negative, and just as we did before, we were using fractions. A positive multiplied by a negative is going to be a negative. So just from here, we've got a positive multiplied by a negative, and there the outcome is going to be negative. You could also alternatively have written this with the negative right in front of the division symbol. Either of these would be fine. You cannot write it on the bottom. We never ever write negative signs on the bottom. Okay, last one. So to start off with, what I have is I have negative 5 divided by 21 divided by negative 50. So my first step, I'm going to write this as a multiplication expression. So remember, it's just like having 50 over 1, or negative 50 over 1. So I can rewrite this. The first piece stays the same, negative 5 over 21. And I multiply by the reciprocal, so I just flip it, 1 over 50. Now, this negative symbol, okay, it's telling us that the entire thing is negative. So it doesn't matter if I put it on the top, on the bottom, or the middle. We don't like to write things on the bottom, just as I said over here. So I'm going to keep my negative symbol up top here. So now, just like before, we like to simplify. So I can simplify 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 50 10 times. There is nothing else that I can simplify, so I'm simply going to just multiply the top, and I have a negative 1, right? That negative sign's there. And I have negative 1 here, and this is going to become positive 1. And on the bottom, I have 21 multiplied by 10, which can simplify to 210. These are both in the most simplified form, and therefore we're done. Now up here, just if you wanted to look at it differently, you could have just done multiplication of the 1 and the 1, multiplication of the two bottom numbers, which is 210, and then gone back and said, okay, well, what are my symbols? I have a negative here, a negative here, a negative multiplied by a negative is positive. We in fact don't need to write this negative or this positive in because it's implied that it's positive, and so my answer is just 210. So either way, but we do sometimes lose our negative signs if we leave them, or positive signs, till the last minute. So maybe try and do them as you go, but you can also feel free to leave them at the end. And that is all for this lesson.